どうもいいな。お祭り男がどうしたの？あれ？
胃のもたれ、胃の痛みに、わしのマークの大正漢方胃腸薬。
Funky colors. Shapes that swing.
It's impossible.
Game of level 15 and it is virtually.
Yo, class, zip those lips fast. In today's lesson, I'm addressing the two laws of new Cheetos brand paws. One, paws are made for way cool fun. Kate, please demonstrate.
This video brought to you by Red Barrels. They explode and are easy to identify, except for in Bulletstorm, that was really stupid.
No.
Yes, we have. Hey, look, it's
Oh
Chance.
my gosh.
Look, I may or may not cut that section out because we had a hopefully we'll get more valid information. Here, this is a problem when I'm doing this on my own. I have 40 things to check off. Yeah, we were quiet, Chance. Suck it. I'm going to edit this out. This never happened. This never
Excellent.
happened.
I'm going to bring it up later.
Oh, shove it.
You don't need to know about a trip. You don't
Shove
need
it,
to know
Ross.
about a romantic
No,
comedy.
we're starting this out. See, now the stories we tell can be more clutch and more defined and less drawn out and whatnot. Jason, what interesting happened this week? You want to tell me about a bad Julia Roberts movie?
Sure.
Really quick.
Yeah, so I watched The God of High School, which, like I said, it's
You
weird.
you didn't say it yet. Remember?
No, you
we were
haven't said.
discussing this before.
What are you talking
and now
about?
it's on the
We
podcast.
never talked about that.
Okay, so it's set in Korea. The main characters, they go into this tournament. It's to find the toughest high schooler. It's an no holds barred fighting competition to find the toughest high schooler, and whoever wins gets a wish. And like I said, I enjoyed watching it, but the more I think about it, the more weird it gets. There's things like the first all the contestants get injected with nanomachines, so if they get injured, they can be repaired. The first round of competition, it's pretty straightforward. You know, the martial artists are there doing their thing. The second round of the tournament, where they go to nationals, that one just gets bizarre because they start pulling in these mystical martial arts forms, and they're drawing powers from deities and demons and crap like that. For the most part, the art was pretty well done, but for some reason they gave them red noses, every single person, and it's not like a clown nose. It's the red nose of, like, they're all drunk.
I'm inclined to think it might be a slightly racist depiction of white people.
It could be. And their ears all look like somebody described ears to someone who had never seen ears before, and they tried to draw them. Because their ears look like they've all got these misshapen cauliflower ears.
Much like Julia Roberts.
And then, and then I watched a romantic movie with my wife. It was Ticket to Paradise with George Clooney and Julia Roberts, and it was actually an enjoyable experience. Not it did get a little preachy in one spot, or in a couple spots maybe. But it's like they had their little preach and then they moved on with the rest of the story, and so it wasn't like they're telling you how bad you are the entire time you're watching this movie. But Julia Roberts, George Clooney, in the past, they got married. They were since divorced. They'd had a daughter, and she graduates from law school and goes off to Bali to have a vacation. And she meets a guy there and decides to get married. So George Clooney and Julia Roberts characters go to Bali to try to prevent their daughter from getting married because they feel that she's throwing away her life, and they don't want to have happen to her what happened between the two of them. Um, and it just ended up being an enjoyable romantic comedy rather than a slog. And um, I speculate that maybe some of this is due to the fact that I was expecting it to be a poorer movie than it was, and it surprised me.
Yeah,
Uh,
lower standards.
yeah.
To add something that
her lips do look bad. They used to look a little bit better, but maybe the plastic surgery and stuff is not.
to reference Chance chatting in the little box we have here, he says, "I don't suck, but I occasionally lick with some enthusiasm." Good lord.
Dear
Julia
Lord.
Roberts' lips look like two slugs who crawled through a salt patch and died halfway across. They
It's
didn't
very
even
descriptive
accomplish
and
their.
terrifying.
Well, you'll learn with Chance that he's got a colorful language. Ross is afraid to share his paddleboard with people, as I've learned. With the
My paddleboard.
well, not when somebody wants to use it. Give it a turn.
Somebody? You mean a squid? Yeah, no giant squid is gonna get on my paddleboard. I don't. Look, they smell weird, and I don't like them. All right, I don't like their suction cups and their
You got squid bigotry, squigotry,
Right,
if you will.
it sounds like it.
Squigotry.
Let's see,
Much like Silver's bigotry.
Oh, so listen, don't even get me
Stop.
started on her.
No.
We're not letting it go, Silver. Shut up about it.
Listen, just because we
Apparently-
are esteemed associates of B Law does not mean you can be rude about it, okay? I mean, I just will not accept this. Not on this podcast.
So apparently the term for Ross is he's toothophobic.
Yep, that's me.
I just looked it up. It's the fear of
'Cause
squids.
unlike bees, they do not have sentience or their own law, and they don't count. So
Oh, and also Silver. Ah.
Oh, not again. I mean, it's never
You
happened.
mean for the first time?
for the first time,
For the first time. Silver went on vacation and told nobody, including me, who talked to her yesterday on the phone, and we're all upset about it because
yep,
Yeah.
disappointed.
she refuses to associate and socialize with people that have new friends of hers. But you know, whatever. I'm not gonna take it personal
to be
much.
You know,
I mean,
it's a little hurtful, and I
next
don't like it.
time, I could send you a lot of awkward pose photos.
Yes, you
If you
have to
want.
pretend like we're two girlfriends who are constantly sending pictures of the stuff we eat, even though neither of us give a crap. Treat me like we're both 20-somethings who are constantly trying to become Instagram influencers. That's all I ask.
Okay, well
That's
now I
all
know,
we want.
and now I shall treat you as such.
And now you shall treat me as such. Excellent.
Hey, girl.
Hey, girl.
Eh,
Silver.
All of your texts are going to open that way from now on.
Oh, yeah.
Good Lord. Well, guess what, everybody? As always, we have a topic to talk about. And this time around, there was a video that Red Letter Media put out talking about the Acolyte. And more than the Acolyte, they had an extensive conversation. Here, let me bring up so we have something to look at. They had an extensive conversation
Yeah.
about the culture war and the drama going on in the culture war. And I thought it would be valid to bring up, not necessarily because we're going to review their podcast, but talk about, in general, the topic at hand, because they're really good on some points and they miss points.
Yeah, I felt that too.
And shockingly enough, we are in a culture war. It's funny. we spend a lot of time talking about shows we like and we don't like. We complain about Star Wars. We complain about. We haven't had a lot of conversation about Star Trek because we just kind of checked out about any new Trek. But a lot of content out there. There's been a internet kerfuffle where everybody's conflicting over major topics, all over the place. And shockingly enough, there is something called a culture war that's going on. Essentially, there's a conflict going on about cultural topics, and they're being fought in popular media. They're being fought through your television shows and your movies and your video games. And I know what you're thinking. You're sitting here thinking, "Wow, that's not really, that's not really going on. You're just overly sensitive, or you're political, or it's because of." We'll get into this because it's a valid thing to talk about, because politics in general has been bleeding into the media that we are consuming. And so when you ask yourself what on earth is going on, that everybody hates Star Wars, or in particular the Acolytes become a massive conflict, or everybody's really pissed off about Star Trek, or everybody's really pissed off about Marvel, it's because we're all picking fights about the politics either being displayed or not being displayed. And everybody's essentially picking sides. And this is what you get in these sort of conflicts. I quite liked, let's see if I can't. So let's at least touch on overall what they talk about. And we'll move on. Me and Ross kind of had a discussion about this before. But essentially, as they pitch it, Mike essentially goes through how there's been a lot of rhetoric about the show, and it's become to a fever pitch. And he talks about a lot of the drama, calling them lesbian space witches, and a lot of people making money off of YouTube videos. Not us, but a lot of people making money off of YouTube videos, creating this drama around the new Star Wars show. And then he makes this effort to sort of describe that throughout time, there's been a lot of writers who've reflected their politics in the shows they make, whether it's politics in the left or the right, which I have no problem with. And that's, I think you're missing the mark if you think that this is simply because people are upset with one thing or another. Like being sitting there saying, well, there's politics in this show, so what? There's been politics in other shows. That's not what we're upset about. We're upset about the fact that it's become worse. But he says some interesting things about it. I think he deals with it very fairly. And he does admit that, unshockingly enough, that Hollywood is mostly a left-wing thing. What's that, Jason?
Well, it's one thing to touch on politics, but it's when the show is not a political show to begin with, but now what we're doing is that is the show. You know what I mean?
Right.
I probably didn't make sense there, but
no, we're exploring the topic.
In the past, these things have been vehicles for entertainment, and it has gotten to the point where they're no longer vehicles for entertainment; they're vehicles for politics.
Well, see, that's the thing. When it comes to a lot of this stuff, when it comes to a lot of the rhetoric surrounding people sort of pointing the finger at shows in particular like Acolyte, as much as we've pounded the message that the political messaging has come to a fever pitch and it's being really pushed in a lot of stuff, from a left-wing person's perspective, they might consider this to be reasonable, or why are you upset, or do you have a problem with diversity? From their perspective, they're looking at it on the outside and only seeing people throwing mud at what am I getting at? They're dealing with a different paradigm than we are. So their paradigm considers the Acolyte's portrayal and how they're going about things a natural state that shows should be doing. And so you coming from the outside and going, well, what the heck is this crap? Makes you come across as perhaps bigoted or racist or whatever. which is what
Right.
makes the discussion around these shows in particular. I mean, they make an effort, I find, at least they state it such, that they don't care about the politics. They care about whether or not the show's good or bad.
They also said that, like, the one guy said, "I know you hate Star Wars," and so it doesn't really seem like either of these guys are fans of Star Wars. Which, on the one hand, that's good because they're looking at the show and basing it on its merits, which is hard to do for someone who is a fan of the original material. I mean, I know that I'm going to have a bias against it if it goes against what I feel it should be. Um, so it seemed like these guys didn't have that going in. Um, and that's kind of where they really missed the point, in my mind, is that they're like, yeah, this is a bad show because it's got the bad writing, the bad acting, blah blah blah. But then they were dismissive of the fact that fans like Star Wars, like would like to see a return to kind of the lightning in the bottle that was the first three Star Wars movies. Um, and they just don't get it. They're like, yeah, that doesn't really matter. It's like, no, it actually does. It actually
Well,
does matter.
for some context, Mike, the gentleman on the right there, he was a big Star Wars fan, and then the prequels came out, and he really did not like them, and he very famously created these video essays where he put on like an affected voice, and made it a character called Mr. Plinkett. Pretty much every long form video essay that exists, especially concerning media, on YouTube, you can trace back to those videos probably. I mean, I don't know who else was doing it before that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Larry infamously had a 70-minute long, I mean, that was the first one,
Rant about, yeah.
Phantom Menace review. And at the time, I mean, there were some people online who were like very defensive over the Phantom Menace. Where like there was a like, I don't know about famous, but a sort of renowned in that space rebuttal on a forum. That was like, I forget how many pages long, to those videos. So I think, like, Rich, the guy on the left, he was never the biggest fan, but he liked the movies. He hated the prequels. He was done with Star Wars after that. Mike liked Star Wars quite a lot, hated the prequels, kind of killed it for him. And so he's like vaguely in a Star Wars fan now. Very vaguely.
Now that's interesting to me that um, that they were originally fans, and now aren't anymore, and just don't seem to understand why people are having a problem
Well,
with things like the Acolyte.
And there's a greater
When
narrative.
they know what the problem is.
Well, here's the problem. There's a greater narrative that we could go into where they're more of a Star Trek fan and they've gone through this whole lamentation of what's happened to Star Trek and whatnot. We
Very
are not
famously
necessarily
recorded.
Right. We are not necessarily here to discuss them in particular and their attitudes, but sort of the subject at hand. Ross, what was your impression of the video?
They made some good points about, how both sides of this, political spectrum, certainly here in the U.S., are using their media to in either defensively or offensively for like their political views, and how like it doesn't matter what gets done, it's wrong, and like whether it's you don't have enough diversity, you have diversity, you don't have these kind of points, like these very obvious, blatant points in your show, that's bad, or you do, and that's bad. Like it's all being used in sort of a battleground for, I think, what's been termed a culture war.
Yeah.
And that does suck because when, and not that it's a point that should be ignored, but like when the reality is that not only is that happening, but then on top of that, the media is not good anyway. Because look, Hollywood has been using movies and television, but especially movies, to make political points for a long time. They were just either more subtle about it, or they made movies that were so good you didn't care. And but the reality is, like, they, I don't know. It's just like what's being made isn't very good anyway. I do think that Mike, having been out of the, and this is just to the video itself, having been out of the fandom for a while, and I'm not a big Star Wars fan either, but I've kind of followed people's viewing and reaction to what's come out. Kind of hurts the video a little bit, because he kind of divides things in a certain way that, while I totally understand what he's getting at, he is missing the fact that there is new Star Wars media, very little, but there is new Star Wars media that both sides like, both sides of this ridiculous culture war. And then there's a lot that people will defend that people don't like, but like, because it just kind of dies out. I mean, Book of Boba Fett is kind of the renowned crappy example of that. Nobody liked Book of Boba Fett.
Well,
it didn't go over well. People didn't like it. And Andor is sort of
no.
the opposite of that. People really liked Andor. It's well thought of as being kind of smarter than your average bear Star Wars
Right.
media.
Right. Well, and he tries to categorize the separate groups. He sort of goes through this diatribe of like how there's exists something that he terms as Star Wars porn. Something like a Rogue One would just be, you know, lightsabers and blowing up spaceships and whatnot as Star Wars porn, and that they made a bunch of Star Wars porn content. He would put Obi-Wan in that, and Ahsoka and Boba Fett and whatnot. And he's like, well, for the people who want to see Star Wars porn, just explosions and lightsabers and whatnot, just for the spectacle of it, like what do you want because you're not happy? And the problem is his category is extremely irrelevant, because he's looking at it as there are extreme elements viewing this content and approaching it with a highly political angle, where one side is highly political in one perspective and the other, and that those who are huge Star Wars fans just want the Star Wars porn, and that he would leave Andor out of that. But the problem is the people he would include in that category hated a lot of the Star Wars porn content he brought up. They hated Obi-Wan. Yeah. They hated Ahsoka. They hated the Book of Boba Fett. And he doesn't seem to understand sort of what's going on. He sort of exaggerates, well, there are two political perspectives and they're extreme and they're picking a fight over this show. And he didn't find the show to be overtly political, which it's telling in and of itself.
Yeah.
Silver, did you watch the video?
As much as I could.
Oh, well, what was your opinion?
I forget when this occurs. I think it's somewhere toward maybe the middle.
Uh-huh.
But when they were talking about having as much diversity as possible in like all the Star Wars, and how even like the cast was talking about, oh yeah, make it the most diverse Star Wars, and somehow they are like, oh, it'll make it better. And I forget which one of them made a good point, bringing up, was it Squid Games? He's like, there's no diversity in that, and that show was great. Everyone loved it. And I'm like, wow, you got a good point.
Well, he did have a good point. Diversity
doesn't make it.
Well, it doesn't have to be diverse.
Diversity for the sake of diversity doesn't mean it's going to be good.
Well, right. Yeah. And his point was fair. Me and Ross were sort of talking about this earlier, but there are bigger problems that he misses the mark on. And I don't know if it's because of his political perspective or how he's approaching sort of viewing this content. Because he accurately talks about how one of the bigger issues with this is the showrunners, which happens a lot with a lot of these shows, essentially thumb their noses at the audience. That he didn't find the show to be very political, but then you listen to all of this dialogue from the showrunners, and they're essentially just like, well, if you don't like it, you're a misogynist, or you don't like it, you're a racist, regardless of whether or not the show is good or not. That there's this hyper politicized language surrounding these types of shows, like The Acolyte and like Star Trek and whatnot. And we've been captured by this. They bring up identity politics as sort of just the new political sort of movement going on, and that's why we're seeing it reflected more in shows. I would push back against the idea that he treats it as if this is just a natural new political movement on par with other political movements that have been reflected in media and content, because this is a whole different phenomenon. Which is funny because he talks about how he's like, well, the only thing I thought maybe is like, well, it's just really diverse show. I don't know why anybody would. And herein lies the problem. Diversity in and of itself is not an issue. I don't care if it's diverse. I don't think anyone on this panel cares if it's diverse or not. The point that we get annoyed about, and that anybody gets annoyed about when we start to see this sort of language, and me and Ross were talking about, I can't remember what show you were referencing, but when you see, let's say I see any movie come out and there's diverse cast in it, I don't think anything about it. But in the media buildup before it, if they go, hey, I've got diversity in this show, my immediate reaction is what they're telling me is that the identity politics is more important, is probably the most important aspect of the show we're giving you. So that signals to me that the politics and the messaging is at the forefront of the content that they've made, the art they've made that they're going to push out. It's not that the diversity is an issue in and of itself. It's the fact that it's shoved into the content with a political effort. If at no point do they use the political messaging about it's the most diverse show ever, this time with Rings of Power, which we're currently reviewing slowly, one episode at a time. But on the build up to Rings of Power, it's the most diverse Lord of the Rings show ever. The first black woman dwarf, the first black elf that we've ever seen. And it's like, what you're telling me is the identity politics is extremely important to the show. And you're signaling to me that the show is bad because you put more emphasis on the identity politics than you did on the writing and the storytelling and getting the lore accurate and representing Tolkien's work accurately. And that's a big issue that he seems to forget, because he goes, well, you might have seen it as more political if they made all of the Jedi white and they were just going around. And it's like, but you didn't see it as political as it was extremely diverse, because lest you forget, practically everybody is not white or just not white male. And it's like, did you not notice that the only white male Jedi in the Acolyte offed himself? Or most of the prisoners in the prison ship were white males? And that's because from his political perspective, it's like, diverse is good. And it's like, but I noticed that diverse is good means non-white men. That's what diversity means. It doesn't mean we get a bunch of different people from different perspectives. And no, which is a racist perspective in and of itself, because you're assuming that different racial groups and identity groups, which is identity politics at its core, think the same and act the same. And so being white, therefore, grants me a distinct perspective that I bring to it as opposed to me as an individual. And that's one of the bigger issues with the identity politics fight, is because identity politics is easy to push into content because it's kind of a soft, encouraging, positive way of going, well, don't you want diversity? You're not saying, it's not an aggressive thing because it's hard to argue against diversity. And then when people go, oh, this show was bad because you emphasize the politics, then they go, you racist, bigoted piece of crap who doesn't like diversity, because it's easy to gaslight anybody who pushes against it, who goes, oh, well, this is really dumb. Sorry, Jason, you were going to interject.
No, I agree. It just seemed to me that maybe the reason that he doesn't see how political it feels to the rest of us is because he agrees with those politics.
Precisely so.
Or at least he feels he can't disagree with those politics.
Right.
And so because of that, he just kind of dismisses it and says, oh, I didn't find it political. It's like, well, yeah, but several years ago, Dan Brown wrote the a book. Which one was it? It wasn't Gods and Demons. That was the second one. Oh, the Da Vinci Code. He wrote the Da Vinci Code. There was a huge uproar about the book, and there was like the Catholic Church was coming down on it. If you read it, you were evil. All this kind of stuff. I decided I wanted to see what the furor was. I read it. I didn't find it um, that divisive. I didn't find it that um, I don't know, that provocative. But then for me, that it very much, I'm not looking at this from a religious, a Catholic especially viewpoint. And so because of that, I don't get it.
Mhm.
I don't understand. Didn't understand the uproar. I mean, it was just an okay book, in my opinion. It wasn't great. It wasn't particularly uh, divisive, in my opinion. It wasn't particularly profane. It was just meh. And so I think that kind of is this kind of situation here, where it's just like, yeah, I didn't find it that divisive or that political. It's like, well, maybe because you're missing the point.
I would like to read Chance's comments and then get Ross to jump in here. But Chance says most leftists are sanctimonious Dunning-Kruger award nominees who believe victimhood is a social currency, and they literally make white knighting those they view as helpless their entire personality. It's more important to feature a disabled transsexual lesbian Eskimo as a hero than write a good script. Ross?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has a blind spot on that a little bit. And the thing is, like I mentioned to you on the phone earlier, is like, and you mentioned it, kind of like in and of itself, that's not a problem. Like, the diversity thing. Like the show was The Expanse, and I didn't even think about it. Didn't even cross my mind. But then I retroactively went back and was watching like trailers for it when the first season was coming out, and then I went, oh. I mean, and I think at the time they were just trying to find a way to sell it. I don't know how much I don't think it was intentionally made that way. I think they just were like, hey, well, this is actually quite diverse. Let's push that point. But it's just like, okay, well, that's weird, because I didn't, like, it doesn't even cross my mind, because it makes sense. Like, everything made sense in and of itself. But, they just, that has to be pushed, I suppose. And I think they were doing it from a sales perspective at that point in time. This has been years ago now.
Sure. Well, and it's a sci-fi show, so a lot more cultural diversity or racial diversity makes sense.
Yeah.
In a space
it works for me.
situation, a lot more melding.
Yeah.
Of people's.
Hmm. So, whatever. But the I what was I was going to bring up one point in particular that, like, I don't know. Just the whole thing is like very. I think this is kind of more like the chickens coming home to roost thing. I think it's diversity, like that point has been used, whether it's not necessarily even by the writers of this show, although it has, I'm sure. But like, I like, when I think of that stuff, I don't think of them. I think of every person in the media, online, like like even actors of different movies and shows that like push that in such a way, and like are such champions of that point. And then the show comes out and it's just garbage. That it's like, well, it's trained the audience, at least a certain subsect of the audience, to like a pathway in their mind of like, oh, they're pushing that means it's trash. Because why is that the only thing they talk about? Like, because at this point in time, in our society, in our media landscape, what there's a lot of things that are diverse, and they're fine, they're good. So like, why do we need to? Why is this always the point that's being pushed? It's, and I think for a lot of people it's very political, and that's fine. But you've trained your audience to go, ugh, never mind. Like, I'm gonna wait and see if it's actually good, because I don't care. Like, if that's what they're pushing, it's probably not good.
And I think that attitude is actually getting reflected in a lot of the reasons why a lot of content coming out lately nobody's seen, because they see, I guess, signals that, hey, this is meant to have political messaging in it for a particular direction, and I'm just checking out. I'm just not, because I already know what you're trying to do. Silver, what do you think?
Yeah, I think everyone shuts down when they are like, oh yeah, you're clearly pushing political messaging here. I don't understand why anyone who makes movies, or I shouldn't say everyone, but like the people that made the Acolyte, they're like, oh, let's make a movie and push the politics of it, you know. How many people want to go throughout their day always hearing politics, then go home, watch a movie, and be like, oh, more politics?
You're
We
not
know
wrong.
Rhett does, but the rest of us don't.
Well, just because I watch so much politics, I have to stay informed. What's your problem? I have to stay informed, and then I
He's a good American, by God.
and then I sit quietly in rage, like most people do when they watch politics, and it's going to bring me to an early grave. That's what's going to happen.
Your ulcer is just waiting there for you, right?
It's wait. Oh, it's ready. It's ready and willing. I am nothing but a ball of anger and rage when it comes to politics.
Waiting to explode.
Well, and perhaps one major point that they're sort of missing is in this discussion, they go, well, I only care if the movie's good or bad. And if it's good, then I like it. And if it happens to have politics or whatever, here's the problem. As much as you might think, which you aren't perfectly objective because nobody is, as much as you might think you're objective, the problem is people aren't. And people make judgments based upon their own value systems, on their own morals, on their own political perspectives. And even if hey, Jeremy, you just appreciate it. Even if you lean in the direction, in one direction, I super lost my point. Even if you lean in one direction or another, you're going to approach content you view from your political perspective. Not even saying that Acolyte in and of itself is necessarily aggressive in a lot of content. There's a lot more subtlety to it, and they didn't find it to be super political. But obviously this is going to be leading the questioner. But if there was a show all about kid diddling and it was really good, would you still consider watching it? And obviously, based upon your moral perspective, I'm not going to ask just in case somebody says yes. Based upon your moral perspective, I'm presupposing that you wouldn't watch it because you have a personal moral and political perspective that makes that abhorrent to you, even if it's good. So there is an occasion where content could perhaps be good, but people find offensive or pushes against things that they value. And it's not unheard of for people to approach content like the Acolyte that they go, not for me anymore. And one of the biggest problems when it comes to sort of the current modern attitudes, which I don't want to get hyper political on this podcast, but with the identity politics, which they address in this video, and the new political sort of direction that's hitting the country and the world at large, identity is of utmost importance, which is why things like diversity being of utmost importance is placed in a lot of these shows. And it's like, well, politics isn't, lest we forget that you are now required to be considered for Oscars to have so much diversity in your show, even if it makes no historical sense, even if it makes no narrative sense. And especially when you place those restrictions on art, it ceases to be art because now you're imposing limitations or expectations on what they think a piece of art should be. And so now you're saying, well, this is what art should look like. It should have so much diversity because identity politics is a new current political movement that we all have to adhere to. And you are never going to be considered for an Oscar if you don't fall into those categories. And you're going to tell me that politics isn't inserting itself into everything and then affecting the quality? Because at its core, whether or not you have one political perspective or another, because believe it or not, people could make a political movie that leans in my direction that I enjoy. I'm not opposed to inserting politics into shows. Perhaps for general audience content, it becomes a problem because you're alienating aspects of your audience. I'm not opposed to that. What I'm opposed to is the current crop of political pandering and pushing in current crops of media are specifically ruining it. They're making it worse. The content is getting bad. It's getting shittier. The writing is terrible. Things are worse because of the political push that's going on. And it's not just, well, right wing really doesn't like it and left wing really doesn't like it, or whoever's. They fully admit that Hollywood is left wing and that this is becoming a massive, that Hollywood leans left wing, and that this gets reflected into the political messaging that they put into content. And then they go, yeah, but the right wing's overreacting, which can happen. And they, well, but the right wing's overreacting. And it's like, yeah, but because it's on purpose. They are deliberately putting their messaging. And it's hard to argue against, because when you go, oh, well, there's clearly this weird pandering, like diversity in the show. And it's like, you racist. And it's like, it's hard to argue because it's an easy thing to respond to. Sorry, I went on a bit of a rant there. Jason?
No, I agree with you.
Ross?
Like I said before, the content is garbage, and it's just getting worse.
Sweet.
Well, and like, I mean, and we were talking about this earlier, and I had mentioned, and this is like the whole, I mean, getting to the show a little bit, I guess, even though our main topic isn't that, but like the witch coven thing in this, and like, I don't have a problem with that idea, but it's done so embarrassingly. I've seen the clips of that like little ceremony they do, and it's like a white woman spiritual retreat. Why? Like, they just do things that are just so odd, and it's like, yeah, you are insane if you don't think people are gonna watch that and go like, what is this? Like, and because like the base idea of like, hey, you know, maybe the old Jedi aren't always up to good things. Like, that's an interesting concept, and
Sure.
they just took it and didn't do much good with, like, they just surrounded by such other embarrassing and like poorly written things that, hey, maybe we will get into kind of similar things in our review of Rings of Power this week. Stick around.
Right.
That like it just, like, how can you pay attention to it? Like, it's just, I don't know. That's my biggest problem. Like you said, is the writing is getting worse, and it's getting just kind of embarrassing to the point where like good ideas are kind of drowned out by stupid execution, all chasing after something that doesn't matter.
Yeah, Jason.
That actually does bring up a point, and I know we've discussed this in the past. I hadn't heard anybody else discuss this point, but they mention in here that like the reason George Lucas wrote Star Wars the way he did was because of the content he consumed when he was growing up.
Yes.
And now the people that are but now it seems interesting that it's what George Lucas did was he synthesized the media content that he was raised on, and now what the writers seem to be doing is, instead of taking the media content, like actually taking Star Wars and doing another Star Wars story, a story like Star Wars, what they're doing is they're pulling in politics. So I don't know where the I don't know what you would say, where the cutoff, where the interchange, where that direction came in, but it seems that George Lucas was more interested in telling a story, and the writers nowadays, they're more interested in telling politics with a story.
Well, and the politics is the point. And it seems like I am creating this boogeyman conspiracy theory, but there are countless interviews online talking about how writers' rooms have become just awful. That they fill writers' rooms with 30 people so that they have as many demographics as possible, so that they could say, look at the diversity in our writing. And then the shows end up being written by 4 or 5 of the people because they're the only ones that know how to structure a story. And that most of all, those people are there just to throw money at so that they can get the DI credit for creating this content. and it's creating.
Unfortunately,
bad content.
none of us are actually eligible because we're all white.
There's no kaiju.
I'd love to have him throw money my
kaiju
way.
monster.
Well,
there's no
category? That
kaiju
seems
monster. Jason, what the heck are you talking about? And Ross is a
Okay,
little
so
swarthy.
the three of us are not kaiju monsters.
I am swarthy. Yeah. Glory to you and your little trees.
See, with the kaiju monster, they just don't have the space. They
They
filled
haven't
it up with the
been federally
DIE people, and they just don't have enough space now for the kaiju monster.
We
I
need
can
to get
stick my
federal
face in,
recognition
like
for
through the
kaiju
window.
monsters.
Yeah.
Just leave the window open.
Yeah, get a Bluetooth headset. Zoom in. Like, it's fine. Come on, Hollywood.
Get your act together.
Just be on the 20th floor in some skyscraper, and I'll have easy access.
What
For
was
the love of
that?
God, whisper.
What was that PlayStation game where you played as like a kaiju and you could pull people out of windows and eat them?
Rampage.
Oh God,
Rampage.
Yeah.
I had a Rampage T-shirt for the longest time when it showed like one of the monsters eating people. I got it for some reason when I bought the PlayStation game back in the day. I don't know what happened to that shirt. I assume it just dissolved after many wears.
Yeah.
Freaking Rampage.
Many washes.
Right. I found the video.
I think that might also be a problem. They're afraid that she might get hungry and just snack on one of them. So
that seems incredibly bigoted, and I am not a fan of this.
Listen,
attitude.
you just gotta move the snack table a bit closer to the window.
She's just reaching for a donut. All right.
I live in constant fear, personally.
Keep the guac in reach.
To read Chance's comment, well, I find people who sit and stew in rage abhorrent, but I watch the DGP anyway. Well, Chance, just to ease your pain, it's mostly me. So it's 1/4 abhorrent, this podcast. But that being said, overall, I found their discussion to be engaging. I thought it was well thought out, and I thought he made an effort to be very fair.
Yes.
The effort was there. It's just there are blinders when it comes to his perspective because he's coming from a different perspective. And
ooh, can I say one thing?
Oh, absolutely. We have more we can go on.
Great video. I did enjoy the video. I always like Red Letter Media. Boy, including all them Will Wheaton clips makes it real hard to get through. It's real difficult. I'm gonna be super. I appreciate they put him in there because it's always fun to see him embarrass himself.
Just aggressive politicking when it comes to the Star Trek content that's been coming out.
Oh, he's just such a chode. Look, Will Wheaton has never been good. I'm sorry. Anytime after he turned about 22, they should have just left him behind in the dustbin of history.
No, he went on to be Space Jesus and travel through space and time. What are you talking about?
It's the funnest name to say, too. Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton.
Shut up, Will.
I liked all of the praise they had for Stacey Abrams being the president of Earth. And how they're like, oh my gosh, how did you feel when she was on? What did you think, Stacey Abrams? Just for anybody who doesn't know who Stacey Abrams is. She ran for governor of Georgia and lost, but on a very small margin. And so many people were miffed and upset about her loss that they acted as if she didn't lose. And she would go give speeches where she would go out and they would introduce her as the real governor of Georgia. She basically refused to give up that she didn't win the election. And then she finally ran when the election came around again and lost by a much greater margin. So she was, weirdly enough, this beloved individual within left-wing politics who refused to
just gone away. She may have won.
who refused to give up the election and ended up actually running again and losing even bigger and establishing the fact that she is not the governor of Georgia. But imagine the politics where you still adhere to the fact, oh, well, she should have won, or it was really, and then putting her into a show that signals to everybody that there is a political lean to the show that you're making by making her the president, and then gushing over her. Oh my God, how'd you get her? She's got nothing to do. What are you talking about?
Well, she's no longer the minority leader in the Georgia State Senate, so she's got a lot going on.
Well,
I
just like I love the shot of, how'd you get her? How amazing. It's like she's got nothing going on. Nothing.
Well, we called her up and she said yes. It's really weird. I don't know.
Well, we found out she wasn't
Sure,
governor.
give me a time to kill an hour.
Time to kill an hour. In a more meta perspective, what we are getting engaged in is there is a culture war being fought over these shows, and anybody who believes that it's not happening is lying to themselves. And it's obviously more exaggerated considering the current political climate, because we're going through a presidential campaign in America at the moment. And for the polarizing figures that are running in said campaign. So it is going to get more exaggerated and more dramatic as time goes on. And this only ends up getting reflected in the viewership of the content that comes out. Lest we forget that Solo lost money, lest we forget all of the money that the Marvels lost, lest we forget all the money that the Marvel movies are losing overall. People are checking out of content because they're bad and they're pushing agendas. And he has a point. There is an aspect of YouTube that I don't want to say grift, but sort of thrives on the drama and creating negative content about, oh, look how woke and crap this is. And it's like, yeah, I mean, but people want to hear that. Like, I don't know what your lament is. Is it because the dialogue has become too vitriolic, or is it because you disagree with that perspective? Because he does fairly say it happens on the left wing too, where you just get abject shills for $1 billion company sort of crawling over themselves to defend the content that is good or bad. One would hope that the politics would either be less obvious or less in your face, and one would hope that you could get your message across better through better writing, and that we can all unite behind good shows or bad shows, but that's not the current climate we live in. It's not. Yes, but I think there's probably more that could be said about this, but I think we've run through our topic, and the video is good, and I would recommend it. But they sparked an idea, and I had things to say about what was going on in politics at the moment, and we should probably news dump everybody.
The Distracted Gamer Podcast. Big steaming pile of news dump.
And that was Chance. It was on the toilet, letting go of his bowels. He hates that.
Sounds way worse when you say it like that.
What? What's your problem? Well, everybody, we're here on the news
want
dump.
Chance to stick around because he's a fan.
He's a fan. We're on the news dump. Essentially, the news dump is we go through as many topics as we can, make comments, so we move on. This isn't the let's dwell on long discussions on every single thing. But to begin on the list, as my news window is poorly formatted, the finale for Doctor Who has the worst ratings Doctor Who has ever received.
Uh-oh.
Worst viewership. I forget the number, but it's the lowest Doctor Who has ever had.
Was anybody surprised by that?
Just people aren't gravitating towards the messaging that the show is putting out, I guess. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you.
So let's see. The quality of the show tanked. They told all of their viewers that if they were unhappy with it to go touch grass. And this, I don't know. This is so dumb.
Well, wasn't the response of, well, if you don't like it, don't watch it. And then they're like, I'm really sad that people aren't watching.
Yeah. Like you told us not to. You said, if we're not happy, don't watch. So we didn't.
Rule
we're
one.
not happy. What?
don't tell your audience not to see what your show. See your show.
That's you think that'd be really easy to follow, but apparently that's difficult.
That should be, yeah.
Well, as the resident not Doctor Who fan, I feel nothing. Jason probably feels
Same.
bad, but he's been checked out.
Well, yeah, I checked out Peter Capaldi season, the season right before they went and switched to Jodie Whittaker. I may go back and see the rest of that. Peter Capaldi is fine, but Doctor Who was taking a back seat to his companion, and the show is not about his companion; it's about the Doctor. That's
a new trend in media I abhor. It's like, if you're going to make a show called whatever, Doctor Who, make it about that character. At any rate,
the companions need to be foils to be there to support the Doctor, to be there to have the Doctor have somebody to bounce ideas, to bounce his personality off of, and to set up situations and stuff. The show they are the secondary, and it needs to be that way.
Right, and should be. Anyway, moving on. Inside Out 2 is killing it at the box office, over $1 billion.
Which is interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I heard it's not political and it's decent and good for them. Because the last how many Pixar movies have just been awful and have been doing terribly. They've been losing money.
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to learn something from this?
I don't know.
Or will they just look at this as a fluke?
Well, you know what they'll learn from it? More sequels, which is the wrong idea.
Which is the wrong messaging. Well, it's like, I guess the standard is produce 3 or 4 really bad Pixar movies, one movie that pays for the others, it does really good, and then 3 or 4 really bad. And then just keep that system repeating. One movie will pay for all of the other ones. But good for Inside Out. What's that, Silver?
Chance says, "Ugh, I wish that intro would die."
Yeah, well, suck it, Chance. Or lick it, or whatever you're going to do. Shifting on to... this is poorly formatted. Despite the success of Inside Out 2, Disney stock has dropped below $100 again.
Bum, 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 bum.
And as much as we are not obsessed with the stock movements of Disney, but Disney is a major player, and it's worth bringing up that their company's still declining, and the overall impression of the company is not very positive. Here we have a bit of news that Jason added. Lord of the Rings anime gives franchise an amazing new chance. I doubt it. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I am interested just because of how much we've been burned on different content coming that's inspired by this. This is an interesting possible opportunity for the Lord of the Rings. It's not based on anything that is, that I guess that you could have too much of an attachment to lore wise, and so because of that, as long as they don't screw too much stuff up, they're
gonna screw it up. It's during the time of Helm Hammerhand in Lord of the Rings, and it's about his daughter.
Yeah.
So sweet.
What kind of got me about this article was the guy that was writing it. Christopher. No, I don't even know I can say that anymore. Anyway, the person who wrote it was saying that the anime seems an odd choice for something that is kind of a European, what's the word?
Fable,
has European
tale,
inspiration in it.
Sure.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, anime is so flexible. It kind of seems to me that this guy has no idea about anime, and that's why he's thinking it's weird. Anyway,
moving on. Suicide Squad Isekai opening released ahead of premiere. Jason.
So I saw the trailer. I
am not interested.
Maybe this is. No, I'm not interested in this either. I saw. There's a lot of interest in it because it's Suicide Squad, and there's a lot of people who are interested in that. Whether or not this is going to be good, I don't think so. But just from the trailer alone, I'm looking at it going, man, this is really rough animation. The animation here doesn't look crisp, doesn't look clean. It looks really poorly drawn. So I don't know.
More about the
Maybe
subject
that's
matter.
for the trailer.
I'd
Yeah,
less
the
have an
subject
issue
matter,
with the animation, more that I hate Harley Quinn and that they're isekai in the Suicide Squad. That's what I hate.
Yeah. No, I get that. I was going to go into that later. It's like I'm just not that interested in the Suicide Squad. I want to see Batman. I want to see the Justice League. I want to see them. I don't care about the Suicide Squad.
I've pretty much absconded from buying mainstream comic books, or at least anything producing now. I might buy back orders or backlog stuff. But if they made a comic where they killed Harley Quinn, I would buy issue number 1. Eddie Murphy wants to remake a classic film with Martin Lawrence, and I'd love to see this.
I don't know if anybody here even knows about this movie. Have any of you seen It's a Mad, 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 Mad World?
Yeah, a long time ago.
No, I don't think I did.
A long time ago. Eddie Murphy wants to remake that with Martin Lawrence.
Okay. I mean, yeah, maybe. I mean, Eddie Murphy has not been a hit maker for a while. Of course, we're getting Beverly Hills Cop here in a few days on Netflix. But yeah, okay.
We'll have to see how that goes.
I mean, I'm
thing
open,
is
but
what I see here is because it's an ensemble cast that does this. There's so many parts that I feel that they'll start doing the DIE stuff just to have DIE in it rather than actually trying to focus on making this a good movie.
I cannot open this Forbes thing because I have ad blocker and it's picking a fight with me. But the Acolyte Rotten Tomatoes score keeps falling, and maybe it should if we ever hope to find balance in the force. It is stabilized back at 14%. It dropped to 13%, but go ahead and elaborate, Jason.
So the guy that wrote this article, he thinks that it is a good idea that we are, as nerds on the internet and things, review bombing the Acolyte. He says he doesn't feel that the score is justified, that it's not that bad, that it should be around where the Book of Boba Fett and
some sort of brigading is involved. It's possible.
Yeah. But he says that it's a good thing that this is happening because it's getting the message out that we're not happy with this kind of stuff. He did say that this is not a good show. Yeah. The guy that wrote this, he's like, this is not a good show. He says, I don't think that it is that. It is bad as the Rotten Tomatoes review score seems to show, but it is a bad show, and we need to basically say that it's a bad show rather than just, looking the other way. Now, one thing that I have noticed is he put in an addition down at the bottom, and I did see some of this stuff cropping up recently. They were talking about the most recent show, or the most recent episode of The Acolyte, where there's lightsabers and all this stuff, and it's a really cool. It's kind of bad when the only thing that redeems this particular episode is the fight choreography. There's nothing else.
The fight
Everybody's like, "Oh, it's so cool because of the fight choreography."
It's not good.
And I'm sitting there going, if there's one thing in the episode that is redeeming to you, then that means the writing is bad still, the acting is bad still, the premise is bad still. Everything else is bad. You can't say that this has redeemed the show. That this one episode, because it might have a passable fight scene, is now making the show better.
Well, he's just saying that he likes the Star Wars porn of it. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, we got to keep shifting along.
This wasn't his...
I
was just going to say, this seemed to be something that I ran into multiple times. Anyway, Dungeons and Dragons, apparently they're making a change for 2024. They're shifting the rules so that you don't get your subclass until class 3, and it's going to be standard across the board. I don't know
Okay.
how people feel about
I mean,
that.
I don't trust Wizards of the Coast, period. Like they've
Not so
gone,
much. I
they've
mean,
gone
it's
political in the past while. I mean, I have 4th edition, which is the last edition, sort of the most recent edition I'm on. Mostly I played 3rd. So whatever. Whatever Dungeons and Dragons.
apparently this so I don't know how this change is going to affect people because they were talking about like warlocks and clerics get their subclass starting at level 1 or level 2 because it's part of the deity that they worship. And so pushing it off to 3 may affect some of the mechanics and stuff. But anyway, that's pretty much the gist of this.
All right. Shifting on, what do we got next? Fallout creator Tim Kaine. I got to bring this up.
Yes. So Tim Kaine, he's the creator of Fallout. Apparently, he doesn't want to return to Fallout at all for any reason.
I saw this article.
He says that he says no amount of money or authority would get him to return to the series. He does say that there is one thing, and one thing only, that would make him reconsider that, is if they do something new. He doesn't like working on stuff that he's done before. He likes to do new things, apparently. That to me seems kind of lame. If you're always doing something new, that means you have no time to get good at what you're doing. I mean, it is interesting.
That's
I
that
can't
old school
say
creator mindset, though, because you got to remember the time when he was making video games. There's so many different genres, and like
that's true.
Yeah, like that doesn't surprise me. That's very old school, though.
Yeah, you just make some.
For me personally, at work, I don't like doing the same thing every day, all day. I do like some variety to spice it up. But anyway, that was the Tim Kaine there. Basically, no. He even said in the article he didn't want to do Fallout 2.
Yeah, no, he did not.
As an aside, I ran. Apparently, the rumor is that the Captain America, the new Captain America, with the Falcon in it, that the budget has ballooned to something like 375 plus.
Wow.
That's all them reshoots is that is pushing the Marvel's numbers when it comes to the cost of that film. And it has been delayed and reshot quite a bit. On top of that, apparently they are back into more reshoots with Snow White after having delayed it for a year.
Oh my god! Again? Wow. Oh my god!
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, more reshoots. Gal Gadot posted an image on her Instagram of like the chair they have for her on set. She's like, "It's exciting to get back to back to this film or this familiar thing," as if they had a big hiatus and she has to go back and do more of it again, like like it's been a while.
If I was them, I would have washed my hands of it.
Well, I didn't include it in the news, but the rumors are that apparently it's been testing really badly. Take that for what it is. But there's some concern that it needs to do really well. So whatever. We've got a few news stories to get through really quickly. Rings of Power Season 2's Galadriel replacement show on the right track. I doubt it. This seems like a fluff piece.
I doubt it too.
Positive about the content.
Well, apparently,
give us a really short synopsis.
Apparently, the two front runners for the show, JD Payne and whatever his name
Patrick,
is, they're
Monahan.
Houlihan.
Houlihan.
Anyway. Hey, Scotty. They're in the article. They're saying that they're shifting who is going to be the main protagonist.
I think it's Patrick McKay.
They're shifting it away from Galadriel, and they're going to make Celeborn the main protagonist for season 2. The reason being is that they feel that there's more flexibility with Celeborn's character. There's less written on him and less expectation because he hasn't been in anything else.
I mean, that's true.
And so they feel they feel that they have more leeway with him as far as fans go than they do with Galadriel's character.
I'll believe it when
And
I
the
see
fact
it.
that none of us like Galadriel's character. She was
Well,
written so.
this is gonna
Ugh.
tune in for episode 4 Rings of Power review. That will be a separate video, but we will talk about here shortly. Because there's a whole discussion to have at the beginning of that. Yeah, I don't trust it. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
We're reaching the end of this. Something about Galadriel, Jason.
Yeah, so Galadriel, this is like Morfydd Clark's take on the character. She's basically saying that Galadriel screwed up so poorly, so she screwed up so badly in season 1 that she is very focused on redemption in season 2 and seeing the bigger picture and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
The thing is that this goes much deeper than that. It's not Galadriel that screwed this up. It's the people who wrote Galadriel screwed this up. And now they're trying to get us to come around because they're saying, look, we're going to fix everything.
Agree. Stuff that should be, I guess, reserved for the Rings of Power review.
Oh, the other thing, just real quick, the other thing, one of those 2 articles, I forget which one it was, right at the start of the article, it said the hit Amazon Prime show, Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. And that right off just tipped me off to the kind of writing that I was going to be getting into in the rest of the article. Because obviously, if this was a hit, we wouldn't be having the problems that we're having. Amazon wouldn't be losing billions of dollars on this show.
But of all companies,
it's only a hit if you are taking into account that the critics seem to be drooling over it.
Well, it's you see this in politics nowadays, but like you could just say that, like, we're not getting political, but if you could see in the debate, both sides go, well, I've had the most successful thing, and the other guy goes, I have the most successful thing. And it's like, so what's the fact? Well, no one's going to look into it. You're just going to believe the side that you agree with. So when it comes to Rings of Power, if they go, it's a hit, and you just go, oh, it was a hit. Like, you're not going to look into the fact that a huge amount of people abandoned the show before they even got to the finale, all of the negative feedback, all of the negative reviews, how it didn't bring in as many subscribers as they expected. You're just going to go, oh, he said it was a hit. It was a hit. Like, you're just going to buy it because no one's looking into that.
I don't understand how they think they can get away with that.
Oh, they can because nobody cares. You're not going to Google if it was a hit. You're not going to Google it.
Well, the thing is, we don't need to Google if it was a hit or not. There were so many articles that came out right when the Rings of Power came out that said this show is a huge flop.
Here's the thing, Jason. Normies ain't going to look into it, and shills who are already on the side and pick the side of the company are going to buy it anyway.
Yeah, I guess you're right there.
Elden Ring's DLC Shadow of the Erdtree passes 5 million tarnished. 5 million sales for a DLC is big money.
Yeah,
that is big
stuff.
Yeah.
Man, did Elden Ring sell well. Like, I mean, it blows me away. And I've been playing it. I like it, but I mean, that's big money for a $40 DLC as well. Moving really quickly so we don't dwell on this. Is really poorly formatted. Oh, Lord. And doing it live. Ubisoft confirms it's going to make multiple Assassin's Creed remakes. I don't think this is going to save them whatsoever. But here's an important couple sentences that'll stand out to you, Ross. Firstly, players could be excited about some remakes, which will allow us to revisit some of the games we've created in the past and modernize them.
Yes.
There are worlds in some of our older Assassin's Creed games that are still extremely rich. By the way, to people sensitive to this content, I don't think they realize saying that they're going to modernize their game is a red flag. But whatever.
Well, what do they mean by that? Do they mean like just update the graphics and all that stuff? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Like just make it HD and beautiful. Fair enough. Cool.
Right.
Do they mean they're gonna make it like the same gameplay system that we have in the new games? Because that's a problem. Do they mean it in like a, as we were talking before, like a shorthand for political crap?
Yeah.
What do they mean? Because 2 of those are terrible. One of them's fine and totally okay. But
I guarantee you, they probably mean the other 2.
Even if they just mean gameplay updates, that's kind of tragic because
they play differently.
Yeah, and that's fine. Let them. Like, I don't know why. God.
But anyway, I'll clarify, Ross. They would have called it a remaster and not a remake. This is a remake.
Yeah, I know. Because here's the thing. They saw, and to be fair, there is exceptions to this rule. I just know Ubisoft, so I know it'll be terrible. But like, so they probably saw Capcom raking in big old buckaroos with their remakes of Resident Evil 2 and 4, even 3, but especially 2 and 4. And those games do play like 4 less so, but 2, I mean, that plays entirely different than Resident Evil 2. Same story or whatever, but it's a different game. It's new gameplay style. It's totally redone. But it still keeps the spirit, the story, the setting. It keeps all that as close as they can. I don't think Ubisoft can get that same. That they're not going to put in that kind of time and effort. Their games are terrible now. Like I don't trust that at all.
No,
so
don't trust it. Anyway, let's run out of here with a couple more things. Apparently, the community manager for Helldivers 2 has been banning players who simply say they're opposed to identity politics.
Oh my gosh.
Not even opposed to the politics, opposed to it being in the game, it looks like.
Yes. Yeah, and they've been banning them. And apparently they've been doing it, that it's in the handbook. They're instructed to do it. So, good for Helldivers 2, as if you didn't have enough controversy and negativity towards stuff you've done in the past. Keep digging your own
I like
grave.
how they were the hot game for like 2-3 months, and then they just keep tripping over their own dick. That's hilarious.
Yep. We have some shots of Superman again. The suit seems oversized, if I'm going to be honest. I like the colors. I don't like the lines in the suit, and it seems like it's oversized to make him look bigger, which they're probably going to edit with CGI later. I'm not super opposed to it. It seems all right. I like the Dungaroos back. No feelings whatsoever. Anyway, moving on. And our final thing, which I wanted to bring up because it triggered me sorely. The broccoli top hair looks like crap on Clark Kent. I'm just going to say that right now.
God, he's so modern and Gen Z. I love it.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I hate him so much.
Give me that broccoli top perm hair, baby. That's what we need for Clark Kent.
That is what we need. Good Lord. Well, you know what we should do really quickly? We're going to do Fight Night. All right, Jason, as I bring this up really quickly, what do we got?
So today we're moving on to, again, this is our second battle in the second round. We have Daredevil versus Mr. Negative. Daredevil, 6 foot, 200 pounds, male, heightened senses, peak human conditioning. You can see his stats there pulled from the Marvel website. Awesome fighting skills. He has some energy projections. I don't know. Energy projection is wrong. He has the ability to manipulate his chi because he's been trained in that way. Strength is normal for human. Or strength is peak for human. Intelligence peak for human. Speed regular human durability as well. Moving on to Mr. Negative. Mr. Negative, I found out more about him. It seems that he's a bit of a split personality. In his
I'm
Martin
moving.
Lee, he's actually a
There
good
we go.
guy. Mr. Negative is 5'11". He's 180 pounds. He has the powers of Dark Force. He has a healing factor. He has superhuman strength. He does have some mind control abilities and hypnosis, as well as sword fighting skills there. You'll see that his durability is higher than base human. Energy is also higher. Fighting skills, not quite as high as Daredevil's. Intelligence and speed, though. Intelligence, he's on par. Speed, he's a little faster, and his strength is much higher than Matt Murdock's. So
my problem with these fights, because we're trying to deal with them very fairly, it's like, well, who would win realistically? My problem with these fights is if you're dealing in an actual comic book situation, Daredevil wins because he's the hero. He overcomes and he figures it out. But if we're dealing with it as if plot contrivances and story biases,
we kind of have to put that aside,
solely based upon their heroic aspects. I want to give it to my boy. I wanted to give it to my boy, but the problem is Mr. Negative is just too freaking powerful.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I could see Daredevil winning, but mostly in a comic book narrative kind of sense, where because he is the hero, he figures out how to manipulate Mr. Negative's abilities against him, kind of thing. But in a straight up one-on-one duel, I don't think Daredevil is coming out on top on this one.
They didn't put in his powers Asian, though.
Yeah. He checks the box, so he moves on. Interestingly enough, he was actually created in the same experiment that created Cloak and Dagger.
Oh, I was quite a fan of Cloak and Dagger, at least at the like the 90s sort of thing.
Yeah, the 90s. So Mr. Negative moves on.
There wasn't even really a vote count. We just like, Mr. Negative.
I was going to vote Mr. Negative just for the name because I totally identify.
You identify with Mr. Negative?
Yeah, because I am negative. I am Mr. Negative.
Mr. Glass half empty.
At my core, I am Mr. Negative.
So next week we will be putting Iron Fist against Kraven the Hunter.
Sweet. I appreciate everybody for joining us for the podcast. If you enjoyed the discussion, like, comment, and subscribe, but like positively, because I'm bitter at the moment. We should just encourage a bunch of negative comments, but whatever.
Comment if you want.
Silver's desperate for comments. That being said, we need to get out. We need to get out of here. It's attached to our self-esteem, people. We need to get out of here. And we'll see you guys for episode 23 in the future. Goodbye.
Bye.
If you like the show, follow Rhett, Jason, Ross, and Silver, the world's most lethally stupid internet personalities, on Twitter at DGPodcast or on Instagram at DistractedGamers. If you liked or hated what you heard here today, you can email them at thedistractedgamers@gmail.com and share your feelings. Not that Jason would care, since he hasn't any, of course.
Oh my God, it's so juicy!